Spider Redgold was part of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom at the UN World Conference in Nairobi in 1985 and Beijing 1995. She became a peace activist in the UK because of the Aldermaston marches and in Australia because of the war in Vietnam. Spider gave a workshop to Australian WILPF members on how to use the internet for peace in 1995. She is interested to share a vision of radical peace. And now I would like to hand over to the formidable Spider Redgold. Spider, take it away.
Okay, hello everyone. I now live on Darkinjun country north of Sydney, and I was asked if I would step in to speak about anything I like to speak about, and it just struck me that speaking about peace women would be a useful thing to do at this time, because it breaks my heart to see the radical feminist and lesbian spaces in the social media world getting just torn apart by anti-Semitism or anti-Islamic feelings, and I wanted to bring us back to the idea that peace is not the absence of fighting. That if there's no fighting going on because somebody in the playground has a really big stick, that is not peace. That is control. Now, it might get disguised as peace, and a lot of people fight wars to have the control, to have the bigger stick, to stop the fighting. I wanted to talk about having a life spent in war. I am a woman born in 1950. I've lived through the development of the Cold War, the Korean War, the Cuba Missile Crisis, Greenham Common and the nuclear weapons on Europe's soil, and then the Vietnam War. Now, Australia actually voted down 3 referendums trying to bring in some conscription from during the Second World. There was one during the First World War to try and force a lottery of some sort, or everybody of that age being put in the military. And Australia, on a whole, is against it, except that we keep on being involved with it, and we are more and more and more involved with it now, being played as a pawn between the USA and China and the AUKUS. And I could do whole presentations on every one of these things, but I don't want to do that tonight. I thought this was a really special opportunity to talk about a peaceful world. And a peaceful world means that I can walk outside my house at any time of the night or day wearing anything and not have to listen to see if there's footsteps behind me, and not have to be aware of whether or not cars are doing U-turns to come up behind me. And that's me, a white woman in a relatively white suburb that this currently is not a no-go zone to police, where I used to live in a no-go zone to police. And that is not peace. There's no officially declared war. But to be at peace as a woman requires I am not controlled, I am not being frightened into behaving in a particular way, and I am sovereign to myself. So to be at peace really cuts through all of our government structures that have been set up under a patriarchal regime that believes that peace is created by strength and by beating people up until they behave, or by killing them until they behave. So there's a connection here, and I hope that what I'm talking about now and leaping from idea to idea will strike something for you to be able to go back and think about it later. That to be at peace is to agree not to fight, not to feel justified. So how do we reach a place where one side doesn't feel justified at using violence in a situation where they feel that they've been oppressed, they've been stolen from, they've been treated badly, they've been hurt, they've been humiliated, and they respond with violence? So there's the response, and people say, oh, well, we're justified because these people did this. It's like, well, these people did this because these people did that. And it goes back and back and back, that there's this idea that there's some justification for violence and that there's some justification that absence of fighting is peace. Now, it's complicated and I don't have a solution, but I can see it in a way that makes me want to talk about it. To decide not to be violent isn't being frightened of being violent. And I know that I get quite a lot of flack for this opinion about being able to defend yourself. But I lived in Sydney in the 70s and women were being hunted by cars full of men in Chippendale, and they would chase you down the street in their cars and try and trap you into a dead end or another car coming across the end of the street. So this was just lesbians in Sydney, girls in the movement. I was 28, 29. And my solution to that was to go and learn to fight. And because I was being hunted. And I think that it's very sensible for women to know their power. And what I say to people when I really want to scare them is, if I've had an interaction with you and you are still alive, I have decided not to hurt you. And I get goosebumps when I say that, because it is, I have decided not to hurt you and I could. And that's everybody. It's not just particularly obnoxious men. It's like everybody. I have learned that I know how to do it and I choose not to. Now, where in my life is there a country or a government that is role modeling that? We decide not to fight. We are not going to retaliate. We are not going to engage in a missile crisis of who has the biggest bomb. And if that's the case, is that peace when we are successful in doing that? Now, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom went into the heart of the First World War, into Belgium, into the battlefields, and formed the first peace organisation on the planet in the middle of a war to try and work out how to create peace. And five, I think, of the global presidents of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom have been given the Nobel Peace Prize. But it isn't working because we've been consistently at war. There are wars all over the planet. There are more and more and more people with very little ethical training or the freedom to think about ethics, having access to extraordinary weapons. So to be at peace, to be a peacewoman, is to not only yourself decide not to fight, but it's not deciding not to fight because you can't. It's deciding not to fight because you know how to and you choose not to. And what would that feel like? At what point do we get a critical mass to have a world where rape is unimaginable, because that is the initial breaking of our peace. Fear of rape, being raped. How do we reach a society where not only rape does not happen because they're scared of the punishment, which even that's not happening, punishment doesn't scare them off. When rape is unimaginable, that no being fears being raped. No being feels that she has to change her chosen path through the forest of life because she does not feel safe. And until we reach that, we are not at peace. And while ever we have governments with massive arsenals of terrifying weapons, scaring each other into stopping fighting, that is in itself oppression and is not a nurturing environment for peace. It just sets up more resentments, more inequalities, more need for control. At the Beijing World Conference on Women in 1995, Bernice Reagan from Sweet Honey in the Rock beautifully said, your individual need for policing is inversely proportional to your self-discipline. If you have self-discipline, you do not need police. If you don't have self-discipline, there is a need for police. So how, from your own self and your desire for peace and your ability to be inside a quiet home where you can pretend it's peaceful, what is it that we need to do that we haven't already been doing for more than 100 years? The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom globally has been doing this for more than 100 years. We've been resisting patriarchy since they first started to set it up. What next? That's my question. If we understand that peace is more than an absence of fighting, and it is more than one mob being in control to stop the other mob, as women, when are we at peace? What is it to be a sovereign woman at peace and security? Peace and security are very fashionable diplomatic words. Peace and security inside our skins. Because until we feel that, and we feel it around us, that feeling like this is actually a safe feeling, then where do we go? And I asked the question that put our lovely lesbian journalist off the air for nearly a year is, at what point, what is it that we do? What do we have to do to make men stop themselves? Because it's rape, it's violence, it's child abuse, it's office bullying, it's schoolyard bullying, it's aggressive driving, it's war. And they just do it. And we engage in it at some level because we are here in the world and we can't walk out from the world even if we would like to. So having that constant fraying of our edges because we do not have access to peace is just such an exhaustion of our energy. And again, going back to the current wars where radical feminists and lesbians are fighting with each other about it's okay for the Middle East to be playing out like it is, I'm terrified. I feel like we're on the edge of World War III. You know, that something's going to suddenly happen and the news is going to be as odd as it was on September the 12th, that they were on the edge of something. And I don't want to feel like that. I want to feel as if the Women's Declaration International is not just about our rights, but it's also about our state of being, that we have the right to be in a state of peace, and that all those other rights are only gifted to us by whoever has the biggest stick. Like, unless we are sovereign and in charge of our own peace and respected, then we are asking for something to be gifted to us by the patriarchy, and that doesn't work. I think I've probably said enough now. I think that all of the organisations that I've mentioned are findable on the web, and you can all ask me lots of questions in question time if you want to. Thank you.
Thanks, Spider. And I suppose now I should introduce you, Janet. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Spider. That was really refreshing and thought-provoking. And it reminds me of Renee Gerlich's presentation that she did for our WDI-IWD a few years ago, where she talked about love and love saving us and us saving love from the toxic permutations that we call love. And she talked about a world without rape. So I think that builds really beautifully on the work that
we've had that conversation. Renee and I have had that conversation about a world without rape.
There you go.
I'm going to turn off now and leave you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Spider. Thanks, everyone.